Welcome back, everybody. We have returned for another exciting episode of the Grim Dawn Newcomer series, and we are going to venture down into the Fort Icon Armory. Away we go. In today's episode, we're actually going to be talking about another hugely basic concept that we'll often take for granted, especially in all action RPGs, or all games. I mean, really. We're talking about monsters, bad guys, demons, beasts, all manner of ill-intentioned stabby folk out to take over the world and end your life as the main character. But before we get going, this is a YouTube video, so feel free to like, comment, and subscribe your heart out, feed the almighty algorithm, or just leave me some things that you think about stuff. Live your best life. Do what feels right. Now, monsters, on the face of things, are just the things for us to click on and kill. They are little balls of experience wrapped in fleshy or bony bits with the intention of haunting our nightmares. In Grim Dawn, however, even the smallest of lowlifes can have big payoffs depending on what you're looking for. That actually wraps back around to our item explanation video, and I'll try to put that in the video right now for you. But you'll hear me toss around the term monster infrequent on occasion. Monsters in Grim Dawn have the distinct possibility of dropping you a truly gameplay-altering piece of gear through these items. So at a glance, what you want to keep an eye out for on green item drops specifically are items that show fundamental changes to your masteries, or your skills, as we would come to think of them. Those are your monster infrequents, and will often take you down a path for your build or hold you over for quite a while until you find something blue or purple that better fits your fancy. Currently, the monster infrequents that we are running on this class are benefiting our, I think it's our shockwave. We had one that was affecting our hellfire mine for a bit, but I'm 90% sure we've gotten rid of them up to this moment. Regardless, this video is about monsters, so let's talk about monsters. We didn't sign up to talk about items, even though the two are almost entirely correlated. Now, beyond just the rabble that amass in hordes around you, we obviously have a few other tiers of enemy. The next most common, but also entirely uncommon monsters are going to be your hero monsters. Everybody's a hero in their own story. Right? That's how that works. Hero monsters are often beefier, unique versions of monsters that you run into in droves, and come from all different factions of the enemy as well. So the cool thing about Grim Dawn is that all the hero and unique monsters in this game were actually handcrafted. They are not procedurally generated. The devs came up with 300 and some specific monsters that they put together just for us. And that is some attention to detail that is really, really nice. There's just something about playing like Diablo 3 where you get like some randomly generated monster named Pus Fart or something, and it's really takes me out of the moment. Really just takes me right out of it. But anyway, let's see, where were we? So hero monsters, even though they're larger, they're beefier, they're still fairly common. Even though they're unique, you'll run into many different versions of them, almost as much as regular monsters. But they do have some distinctions. Well, mainly the big ones are that they're going to be resistant to a crowd control effect and percent health damage as well, whereas your normal mobs, your little guys, are going to be subjectively easier to CC and hit with percentage-based damage. Your heroes, your big guys, have built-in resistances to them. Though it is the lowest of the higher tier monsters, in terms of resistance, it is still a resistance. So take that into account when you are fighting them. As well, I mentioned they come from each of the different factions of enemies, so you can have a hero monster from the Beast faction, the Ethereal Vanguard, Void, all that stuff. So it's pretty nuts. Oh, right, and Woo. We're talking to Anastasia. Sorry. I just burped in my mouth. It wasn't a good feeling. Glad you were here for that. Anastasia is she's a faction in and of herself. She is a one-person faction, and she has a quartermaster. You can see him on the top side of the screen right there. He is just a skeleton. He has only got 2 faction, or Anastasia herself only has 2 faction tabs. So she's only got Revered and Honored, I think it is. She doesn't have any blueprints, sadly. So she just got armor, which is unfortunate. But she also has a bunch of augments, which you can see right there very quickly, because I just like to flick back and forth. But oh, there you are. There is your the rest of your stuff. But yeah, farming for her specifically is a lot easier to do in quests, but you can also attack her. So if you choose to fight her, she will turn into a boss with a bunch of... Well, she'll lead you down into the basement of the fort and try to kill you. I personally never go that route, because I don't think that killing good people is fun. But, you know, whatever. Do your thing. Live your life. If you really need whatever she's got to offer, go for it. It's a video game after all, and it shouldn't affect your moral compass. Or should it? I don't know. Let's not dive into that now. That's a conversation for people much smarter than me. Now, back to hero monsters. So, right, so hero monsters, not only do they have those resistances to crowd control and % health damage, making them more survivable, but on top of that, they can have their own affixes. And what I mean by affixes is that they will have particular stats and abilities given to them that will pop up right under their name bar. And those affixes will be giving them very subjectively strong ways to fight you. So if you'll notice, when we're hovering over any of the enemies right now, all it says is Beast under their name tag. That's just part of the faction that they belong to. There's also Beast Kin, but the distinction is pretty small there. But if you're playing if you're fighting a hero monster, and nearby allies, completely immune to crowd control effects. There's also another affix called Void Touched, and that's going to let the monster fire off blasts of chain lightning that are the chaos variety. So it's going to deal damage to you. In some instances, those Void Touched enemies will also teleport with the like a chaos blink type of ability. But there are at least 18 different affixes just for hero monsters, so if you find a particularly deadly one that is causing you some issues, figure out what the affix does, and you might get yourself some insight on how better to take them down. And once they do die, anytime a hero dies, they will drop a little pellet full of goodies, which we're about to see right here. But you can see there, Bloodclaw, the guy that we were hovering that whole time, did not have any affixes, so he was just a particularly tanky werebeast man guy. Then we didn't have a whole lot extra. You can see the little pellets pop out of them. You whack the pellets. I'm sure you've picked up on it by now, but every time they die, they've got those things, and you just open them up like they're Easter egg, jack-o'-lantern full of candy. You get the metaphor I'm trying to go with here, but all the gear is inside there. I'm sure you figured that out by now. Welcome to the year 2000. I won't date this video, but that's fine. Everything's fine. We're fine. Now, since we've talked about the monster pellets and all the things that the hero monsters do, we're going to talk about boss monsters. Now, bosses are going to be your uniquely modeled crazy guys with even crazier abilities. You'll notice after a few encounters with these buggers that there are oftentimes big chests in their layers. These chests are going to be locked by quote-unquote a powerful force or some other such menagerie of words, but that will let you know that you have to kill the boss before you can open the chest. Not only that, but boss monsters themselves will usually drop tasty items and some of their own really kick-ass monster infrequents. Remember, bosses do have monster infrequents, typically, but the drop rates on those are going to be rough. So if you are looking for... There is an enemy called... he's a Chthonian enemy. His name is Salazar. I think his name is Salazar the Blade of Chthon. But in order to get his sword, you're going to have to farm him religiously. And the trouble with that is that his sword drops very, very scarcely. I think the last time I was actively trying to get the sword from him, it took me, I want to say, 20 to 25 tries. And that was not a fun time, because getting down to that boss character to pick that up, it was taxing. It was taxing on my patience bar for sure. But Salazar's blade is required for some relic crafting, so I had to have it, which means I had to funnel all my attention into that guy. That said, boss monsters do insane amounts of damage. They have even more insane health pools and carry around basically an immunity to all CC and percent-based attacks. They're the most challenging battles in the game, but that is not without good reason. Just in our playthrough so far, you can see bosses like the Amalgamation, Warden Krieg, and High Priest Zarthuzalon giving us a run for our money, but ultimately leading to very, very big payoffs in the entrance to the Key Dungeon, or some tainted brain matter, or opening up the next act for us. Boss monsters are boss monsters for a reason. Now, the next level of monster comes in the form of nemesis bosses. Now, I know what you're thinking. You just talked about boss monsters. What's the actual difference? Well, nemesis bosses can only be encountered by reaching nemesis status with the enemy faction that you are trying to find the nemesis boss for. For instance, if you've opted to slay Kaiman's Chosen to the point of reaching that final tier of reputation in the nemesis tier, you can find the Iron Maiden at Fort Heron, Fort Icon, or the Tomb of the Archon. Nemesis bosses will have all the attributes of a regular boss fight, and the added benefit of sneaking up on you with a random spawn if you're not ready for it. Now, that being said, they do have specific locations that they will spawn at, so if you are not in those locations, you don't have to worry about them. But considering that there are multiple spawn locations that the enemies can pop up at random, you'll have to check each one if you've hit that reputation marker and are trying to farm them specifically. However, once a nemesis has been beaten, they can drop some pretty crazy monster infrequents, along with really, really strong regular loot drops. So the last nemesis boss I ran into, I believe he dropped me 2 legendaries on top of a couple blues. And I want to say it was more purple and blue than it was green, but then again, I can't remember the encounter entirely. That said, though, that is kind of par for the course when it comes to the nemesis bosses. They're going to drop you big, bad loot, and their monster infrequents are going to be incredibly, incredibly powerful if they apply to your build. So, really, really, really strong stuff. And now, we've got even another tier of monster to talk about. I know, nemesis bosses weren't the last one. How dare he continue on? But, lastly, and probably most heinous of all, are the celestial super bosses. Celestial bosses are in a tier all of their own. So while they do share nature with the bosses and the nemesis bosses, Celestials will often require a set of quests or specific triggers to be completed before they can actually be encountered. And that goes beyond, just farming negative reputation with the Nemesis. You actually have to go out and complete specific quest lines. You have to go to certain locations. You have to do a lot of things and meet a lot of parameters before you can encounter these bosses. You might hear them actually referred to as secret bosses in some circles as well, which is pretty on the nose, considering all the hoops that you have to jump through to kill them. What I feel is the easiest one to encounter is going to be Korvac, the Eldritch Sun. I'm not going to spoil any bits for the end game so far until we actually make it that far in this playthrough, but Korvac is relatively easy to find, and even if the fight itself is easy to get to, it is a massive, massive pain in the ass to complete. Korvac, especially solo, if you are not prepared for him, will cram it all up inside you. And then dealing with his attack patterns and making sure that you can survive his attacks is pretty nuts. But all that aside, he is definitely the easiest of the celestial bosses to find, but definitely not the easiest to fight. These enemies, however, again, like I mentioned, they are going to be the most ungodly strong ones in the game, but that means, I'm sure you're picking up the theme by now, the ridiculous bosses in the game are going to drop the most ridiculous loot. All sorts of purples, all sorts of blues, all sorts of sets. Anything that you could ever hope to obtain in your entire life, well, in the life of Grim Dawn, you can get from a celestial boss. Within reason. Obviously, you can only farm them so hard, but you get where I'm going with that. I do want to do a deep dive later on with both the Nemesis bosses and the Celestial bosses, but for now, just know that they are out there in the world. The monsters are always hunting, evolving, and they want to eat you. Eyeballs first. And that is going to do it for this episode of the Newcomer's Guide. We're just going to drop it off in Sorrow's Bastion here, turn in some nice, easy stuff. I know it was a little bit of a short one, but you know what? I'm pretty proud of that one. We'll let it go. And we are actually going to bring back to life the Archon. The rest of this video is just going to be my character talking to Kaiman and the Archon, but once we can get all these stupid text boxes out, you can see him. This guy is actually going to be a boss if you end up going with the Death's Vigil. The Archon will be, you call it a spirit. This sounds like necromancy. Calling him out on their bullshit. Sorry, but the Archon will be the boss if you go with Death's Vigil. Death's Vigil has Malkadar as the boss if you end up siding with Kaiman's Chosen. So you can see him there. He's big and transparent and golden. He's got a big old hammer. And he's a very grumpy dude. But that is it. Again, thanks so much for hanging out. Peace out.